we're talking about creating an emotionally healthy Christmas season. And of course, that has to do with being emotionally healthy, which we'll define in a minute. But I wanted to ask, as we begin, to think about what are the major stressors, what are the major concerns that you're holding as we enter this Christmas season. Hard to believe it's December 8th already. Anybody surprised by that? Does it feel like, no? Okay, it feels like the year's going pretty quick for me. And I want you to be thinking about, like, what are the challenges you're facing? What are the stressors that you're holding? And if you have notes, take a minute, just write down a few things that you're really thinking about, that you're worried about, you're stressed about as we enter into this Christmas season. I'll just give you a minute of silence as you do that. And then I'll sort of launch into my introduction. And as we're writing down some of the concerns that we have, I'm going to open with a word of prayer as well. And why don't you just pray with me as we do this? Father God, we look to you this evening as the source of our strength, source of our help, the one who's given us life, the one who really ordains and foreordains all things according to the counsel of your will. And so, Father, I pray that your peace would invade our lives, that you would allow this to be a refreshing time, a time of learning, a time where we can go close to you and really look to you for the one to be our help. So I pray that you bless each person here, and thank you actually for the miracle of technology, that we can join each other during this time of for a time of separation and isolation. So we thank you for your faithfulness to us and for your love to us. In Jesus' name, amen. For some of you, you're Zoom savvy, and others may not be, but in the chat room, you can ask questions. And as you ask questions, Angela will monitor those and maybe, jump in at some time. I'm also not opposed to having you raise your hand at some point and chime in. It doesn't have to be a full lecture here, but I really want to engage you with some things here. So first, as we think about some of the challenges of the Christmas season, it's supposed to be a time of joy and a time of celebration. And for some of us, in our heads anyway, we experience a huge buildup. I don't know if that's true for you. It used to be way more true for me than it has been in the past. Although, to be honest with you, Christmas Day is my favorite day of the whole year. It's my favorite day of the whole year because it's the one day. We have two kids who are now adults, but every Christmas from the time we were, my kids were, born, it was the one day where we sort of did nothing but sat together. We had a philosophy of opening up presents. We gave the kids presents, but we would give them one present and we'd say, now go play. And they'd go play and they'd come back and then they'd enjoy another present. And it wasn't rip through the presents in 3 seconds and then it's done. So it was literally a day of that. And then a fire and the whole bit. But there's a huge buildup at this Christmas season, oftentimes with expectations. There's nostalgia. There's images in our heads of the warm fire and the lights and friends and family and all that. But on the other hand, the reality of getting together with family can be a different experience, or the reality of being alone can be a very different experience than what is in our heads. So we forget that the family that we are so warm and fuzzy about also still has the same kind of dysfunctions, unhealthy communication, and even, difficult people and even toxic relationships exist, right? And, Uncle Gus is still Uncle Gus. Just because it's family time, he still drinks too much. He still tells off-color jokes, right? And Aunt Janice still gossips about Aunt Isabel. Compounding all of that is the fact that we're living in a pandemic time where there is isolation and lockdown. And, I don't know about you, but if you've been watching any of the political things that are going on, and even now going on. I mean, it's not a time of peace. It's a time of unsettling, political unrest, really. And it's also a time when loneliness really gets heightened. And even if you're in family, sometimes loneliness can get heightened. But if you're alone, certainly that's the case. Um, and it's a time where we remember loved ones who are no longer with us. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my mom's death, and in 2 weeks is the anniversary of my dad's death. So it's a time for some of us who are nostalgic or oriented to time. It becomes a burden. So many of us have different realities that we enter into during this season. And of course, the reality of Christ's birth, right? The reality of what the season really is all about. That this highlights a time where God's love for us who are sinners, and he's come sacrificially to die for us. So it's a time of joy as well. We're sinners saved by grace, and we really can and do experience transformation from the inside out. So we have this element, right? So I want to recognize, just as we talk about the Christmas season, it's a challenging time, even in the best of worlds. And so the question is, how can we make it an emotionally healthy Christmas? How can we have the capacity, even increase our capacity to handle both internal stress, anxieties, worries, and external factors or stressors that are there just as a fact of life? And that's what I want to do. I'm going to talk about, number one, I'm going to talk about and define some terms: emotional health, capacity, and resilience. Those are three terms I want to talk about. Then I'm going to talk about handling some of the stressors internally, primarily anxiety, but not only anxiety, because many of us struggle with depression and other stuff that comes up for us during this time. And then we'll talk a little bit about external stressors in our life. And then I want to give you, I've really packed this full. I'm going to give you a couple of skills that I think are very transformative in terms of the way we deal with people, if we have time. And I will sort of edit on the fly here as we go. I also, again, if you have some questions, feel free to jot them, send them in the chat. And also write down some questions as we go. Maybe at the end, I'm happy to stay and just, we can dialogue about some things. So let me talk about three concepts that are really important, key concepts. Then I'm going to break and give you a chance for questions. But the three concepts we want to talk about are emotional health, capacity, and resilience. Okay, those are key concepts here. So first of all, what does it mean to be emotionally healthy? A lot of Christians have an allergic reaction to the word emotion or the concept, because many times we're taught that we're not supposed to be emotional. We're not supposed to be driven by or controlled by emotions. Anybody ever hear that? But we're supposed to walk by faith. See, we walk by faith, not feelings. And I just want to unpack that for a moment, because you see, emotional health really means being emotionally self-aware and coping well and being effective in the midst of difficult situations and difficult emotions. See, the reality is God created us as image bearers, and so we image him in multiple ways. One way we image him, one way we're like him, is that he's a personal God, meaning he's a God that is relational. We know that because he entered the world and has relationship with us and all of his creatures. We are relational beings. We image him as relational beings. We're created for relationship. That's a key concept, particularly in this Christmas season, particularly if you're alone. And if you're alone, not by choice, it's really hard. And one of the reasons it's hard is because we're built for relationship. We're called to love God, to be in relation with him, and we're called to love other people, to be in relationship with other people. That's one way we image God, right? A second way we image God is that we are rational beings, intellectual beings, meaning he is a logical, rational God who thinks and reasons and plans, and we do the same. And when we think and we reason and we plan, we're imaging him. That's a good thing. And, You know, many of us are oriented more toward our minds than our hearts or our emotions. But he's a rational God, we're rational beings. What I want to drill down on is this idea of he's an emotional God. God is he's a person who is emotional. He invented emotions. He made us as emotional beings. And that's an important element of us, just like it's important that we're relational or rational beings. Scripture reveals God as a being, a person who feels. He beams with delight and joy in Genesis when he creates the world. He saw the world, it was good, very good. He delighted and relished, right, over that. Jesus wept, and it says God was grieved when he made humanity, and humanity fell. And when Jesus saw that Lazarus had died, he wept even though he knew he was going to raise him from the dead. And you can't read through the Psalms without really getting an understanding that we're created as emotional beings and we're created to feel deeply. Now, many of us are much more oriented emotionally than we are intellectually, let's say. Or we're related in some way, we are oriented to relationships. But the point is, to be a full person imaging God, we have to be rational, relational, and emotional as well. Not to say we allow emotions to control us, but allowing yourself to feel is an essential part of being human. It's a unique thing about men and women that were made in God's image as emotional beings. So here's the point. Spiritual maturity and formation includes experiencing our emotions. And so many of us are raised either in a church or in a family where you're not allowed to feel, or you're not allowed to feel certain emotions like anger or sadness or fear or anxiety. We're told those are bad emotions and you shouldn't feel them. Remember, faith, not feelings. But I think that's a misrepresentation of what it means to be human in a way that reflects the image of God. So what is emotional health? It means to have self-awareness, emotional awareness, being able to feel deeply. It doesn't mean that I've reached some Zen-like state of mind which is impervious to life stressors. And it doesn't mean that I'm always happy. And emotional health is something that you're not necessarily born with at all. It's something that is developed within us over time. I mean, that's why when you see a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, or your 22-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, you want to address that and help them to have some kind of control over their emotions, and yet not deny their emotions, right? I'll pause there because that's just one concept that I just want to make sure we're together on. So any questions on that? All right, I'll keep going. Feel free to jump in. All right, the second definition that I want to talk about is capacity, the idea of capacity. Now, when you think about capacity and you think about, let's say, a tank or a suitcase or something that holds things, it's really, the idea is the maximum amount that can be received in a container, right? If you try to fill a 22-gallon tank with 25 gallons, what happens? Overflows. And certain things that we fill can break if you fill them too much, right? When I go scuba diving, we have these tanks, and they're designed to contain a certain amount of pressured air under pressure. If they fill that too much, right, it's going to explode. So the idea of capacity is an important concept as we think about being emotionally healthy. How much capacity do you have at any given time? And it's really important to realize that our emotional capacity and our capacity to handle stress and handle things that are really getting to us sort of increases and decreases over time, depending on what our circumstances are. Sometimes we have more capacity to handle things. Sometimes we have less capacity to handle things. But the point is, one of the big points I want you to get from this time together is monitoring your capacity is an important aspect of creating an emotionally healthy Christmas season. Because if you can recognize that your capacity does ebb and flow, you'll be able to make choices. Sometimes we have to say no. Sometimes we embrace our limits. Sometimes we say, you know what, I've been to 3 Christmas parties, I can't do another one. Or I'm under such stress at work, I can't take on another project. That's a mature way of understanding your capacity for whatever it is that you're embracing or not embracing. You know, if you think about what your capacity is, this is a really important concept. So if I were to give you let's just say I was going to say, if to give yourself a grade of your own capacity right now in terms of handling stressors, what grade would you give us? If I said 10 is full capacity, like you have great capacity to handle stressors, give yourself a 10. If you have no capacity or very little, give yourself a 1 or a 2 or somewhere in between. All right. And for those of you who would like to, you can just put that right in the chat room and let's just see what your capacity levels are. Who's got 10s, who's got 1s, who's got 3s. I would say mine is probably right now 7 to 8, depending on what it is you're going to ask me to deal with. And by the way, a personal example, like right now, my house, my bathroom, came home to my bathroom, there's no toilet there. The sink is not working. Thankfully, we have another bathroom in the house, but it's far away from the bedroom. And my kitchen is being redone. We had a leak. We had a number of leaks. So the point is, my capacity to handle more crap in my house and mess is pretty low. Like, I don't want to have another project going on at the same time with dust and all the stuff and disorder. I'd be embarrassed if I turned my computer like 3 inches. First of all, my wife would kill me. And second of all, I would be humiliated because this room is completely filled with everything else that's supposed to be in the bathroom. All right. So what kind of, let's see, I'm going to look at our chat for a moment. Let's just see what kind of ranges we have. 5, 8, 7, 6. Okay. 7. All right. I don't see any 10s here. Am I missing anybody? All right. Thanks for being honest here. But it's really important to understand your capacity. Third concept, very briefly, is the concept of resilience. Resilience. And I'll give you a technical definition. I thought it was sort of an interesting definition, the way it was, I think it was in Webster's dictionary. And then it makes sense as I think about it. Resilience is the capacity of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation caused by compressive stress. Did y'all get that? The capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation caused by compressive stress. All right, so what do I mean by that? I don't have a Nerf ball in here. If I had a Nerf ball or a pillow and I compressed it, it's got capacity to retain, to come back to its shape, right? If I take this tissue and I crumple it up, it really has nothing in it there's nothing that puts it back together. And so when I try to untangle it, right, it's still not doing anything. It sort of looks like it's been used now, right? So the idea of resilience is an important thing because people who lack resilience are more likely to feel overwhelmed or helpless, or to rely on unhealthy coping mechanisms like avoidance or isolation or self-medication. Resilience gives people the emotional strength to cope with trauma or adversity or hardship. And when you're resilient, you can utilize your resources. So there are some times when my resilience is low. And so the smallest thing stresses me out, wigs me out, way out of proportion than the thing that it is, right? How many of you have ever been, you're cut off when you're driving and you go ballistic, right? And it's so out of proportion. My bathroom, I've got to walk 20 extra steps to my other bathroom. And instead of saying, thank God I've got another bathroom, I'm like, I'm just grumbling, right? Lack of resilience can, impact us. And it's really, really good to understand how resilient you are and in what circumstances you don't really feel resilient, right? And so if I was going to ask you that, what score would you give us today? 1, no resilience. 10, I'm feeling pretty resilient. If I get some normal stressors coming my way, I'm fine. I can handle it. So just jot that down. And if you'd like, just share it with us so that we can see what yours is like. And you notice, sometimes that you'd have a different score of capacity than resilience. All right, let me pause for questions. Just raise your hand and unmute yourself if you'd like to. Does this mean that you're all with me, or does it mean that you're like somewhere else? I have capacity for affirmation. Okay. You're with me. Nod your heads. That is the issue with Zoom, right? Okay, good.
Dave, you've got between 3 and 8 on your scale. I don't know if you're in the chat window, just so you know.
Okay, yeah.
In resilience, the responses in there.
All right. Yeah, and we'd expect a broad range here. And one of the key things is to, again, as you enter and you want to have an emotionally healthy holiday season, you want to know your capacities. You want to know your resilience levels and be able to understand yourself and have emotional awareness of what's going on in order to handle it, right? That's part of the learning here. Now, I want to switch now. Those are sort of the basic concepts that I wanted to teach. And now I want to ask this question: how do we handle what's going on the inside, internal stressors, and how do we handle what's going on the outside? So we have internal stressors, we have external stressors, right? And I want to divide those up. And we're going to first address the internal stressors and how do we manage our capacity for internal stress. And by internal stress, really what I'm talking about are the things that go on inside us, like anxiety, depression, the malaise, the different things that are happening internally and how that arises. And I want to talk about this in the context of anxiety, because I think everybody can identify with anxiety. Most people, not everybody, but most people do experience some levels of anxiety. I would assume that you can relate to that. So let me define anxiety. I'll give you some definitions that have helped me. And by the way, just personal disclosure, I was raised in a Jewish household. My mother was highly anxious. She was so anxious that she worried about virtually everything. So if I'm going out to go to the store, she'd be anxious that I'd have to pee. So Dave, did you pee before you go? Right, that kind of thing. Very neurotic Jewish mom. And so she worried about all kinds of things. Now, I think that's both taught and caught. And so I was taught it, but I think I caught it because if I look at my family, my grandmothers, both sides, anxiety, and other people in the family. So, it just sort of filters in there. So I would say that I'm an expert in anxiety, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it. But anxiety, the Greek word for anxiety really means to be pulled apart in different directions. And I think it's an appropriate description when you think about that. That's what it feels like. If you've ever experienced anxiety or pretty severe anxiety, you can feel like you're being pulled apart. And here's the definition that has helped me the most. And I help a lot of people when I'm counseling with them with this. It seems to be very helpful. So here's my definition of anxiety and see how it resonates with you. Anxiety occurs when I import my imagination of a future event into the present, and my mind and my body experience it and respond to it as if it's happening right now. Okay. I guess I didn't write that out. I just gave you a place to write it out on the handout. So let me read it again. Anxiety occurs when I import my imagination of a future event into the present, and my mind and my body respond as if it's happening right now. So it really has to do with what's happening, not in reality, but what's happening in my mind, how I'm thinking, what I'm thinking about, right? So if I think about some future event, let's say it's a meeting with a boss, or a stressful situation, or a family member, right? And you know it's going to be tough, or you assume it's going to be tough, and you start to imagine it, the test that you're going to take. As I'm thinking about it, my body is going to respond as if it's happening right now. And you begin to feel the emotions one might feel if it actually was happening. So you might have found yourself imagining something like that, and then all of a sudden you notice that your feelings are following what your imagination is, right? The thing that's really helpful to understand is just the definition, because if you understand what I'm saying here, it's helpful to realize we're not importing into our mind an actual event. It's an imaginary event. In other words, it's what's happening up here. So I'm going to give you an acronym to handle anxiety. And it's right there in your notes. It's REST, R-E-S-T. And we're going to walk through each of these. So you understand, and this is something you can do to handle internal stressors. Internal stressors, okay? You rest. What do I mean by that? Number one, you're going to redirect your thoughts to the present. Number two, emotions, E, you're going to scan and enter into what you're feeling and be aware of it. Number three, you're going to ask yourself, am I engaging in wise, good self-care? And number four, T, you're going to talk to God, pray. And you're going to talk to a trusted person, okay? So if you're having anxiety, if you're having internal stresses during this holiday season, I'm going to ask you to rest. How can you move from anxiety to rest? By the way, I'm just going to give you some highlights here, but if you want a much more in-depth look at this, there's a sermon that I preached, a two-part sermon in a few different places, and there's some interviews that I've done on this. It's on our website. I think Angela can slip into the chat room some links at some point, but it's helpful, you know. It's helpful for those of us who experience anxiety. Okay. So like I said, there's some sermons on there, and then there's some interviews that Bob Gaglione at Calvary Chapel and another pastor did on anxiety. So if that might be of help to you. So let's talk about rest, okay? And the idea of rest is we're going to R, and we're going to spend more time on R, okay? R is redirecting my thoughts to the present and stay present in God's presence, okay? When I'm having anxious thoughts, when I'm having internal stress, I'm going to redirect my automatic thoughts, which I'll explain. I'm going to redirect my automatic thoughts to the present and stay in God's presence. So I've already alluded to the idea that when you experience anxiety, anxiety is a disorder of thought. Think about that. Anxiety is a disorder of our thoughts. You see, we think about things. We are rational beings. We think about lots of things, and we have great imaginations. That's a godly trait. So when you start to think about something and you're imagining something that's stressful, it's going to make sense that you are going to feel stress, anxious. So the idea here is you're going to redirect your anxious thoughts. You're going to become conscientious of what am I thinking right now? And I'm going to say, I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to be present. I'm not in that meeting where I think I'm going to get fired right now. I'm here in my bed. I'm not at this stressful place. I'm here in my room. And you start to focus on what's true and where are you now, okay? Sometimes we could call that, I'm going to center myself here in the present. I've worked with people with panic attacks. I've had panic attacks where I learned to stay right here, and I'm not here. I am in my chair, and I can feel my feet on the floor. I can feel my butt on the chair. I can feel my back on the chair. So you want to get grounded in reality, not in anxious imagination thoughts that are not real. I don't know about you, but I have spent hours of my life, maybe years of my life, imagining things that never came about, right? They never came about. Worry is like sitting in a rocking chair, lots of movement, but you don't go anywhere. Okay, and I think that's a Ben Franklin quote. Now, here's the thing. And by the way, can you all identify with what I'm talking about? All right. So now, it's possible to be conscious of thinking about things that make you anxious, right? Just a real quick example, and some of you may have heard this example. How many years? 8 years ago, a very dear friend gifted me and my wife a trip to Turkey to go on the voyage of St. Paul. How many have heard the story? Makes me feel better if you haven't. Okay, a couple of you. But I'll just make it brief. So think about this: an all-expense paid trip to Turkey to go on a cruise ship on the voyage of St. Paul. Now, most normal people would just be delighted and happy, and I sort of had a normal response. I was delighted and happy. Then I had an anxious response, which was, wait a minute, there's terrorists in the Mediterranean where we're going to be, and there's riots going on in Turkey. So what did I do? I started to get anxious, even though the trip was 6 months off, because I'm imagining things, right? That's being conscious of thinking about things. And I was conscious, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about this. I'm worried about this, right? We also have automatic thoughts of which we're not that conscious. Okay, we have automatic thoughts, they're called automatic because they sort of pop into our brain and we don't have a lot of control over them. They just sort of pop into our brain. Those are called automatic thoughts. Now, an automatic thought is sort of an instantaneous, habitual thought that goes through our mind and it affects our emotions. So let me illustrate this, or let me have you illustrate this by doing a quick exercise. I want all of you to close your eyes, and I want you to think of a beautiful, beautiful beach scene or a mountain scene, whatever gives you most peace and tranquility. And breathe through your nose, rest. And I'm going to be quiet for the next season of time. And what I'd like you to do is raise your hand when you get a thought that is off topic of that beautiful beach scene. Okay, because your eyes are closed, I will tell you that the first person raised their hand in about 3 seconds, and virtually everyone here has raised their hand, except maybe 1 or 2. I can't tell if Piper has raised her hand or not. But you see what I'm talking about? That's an automatic thought. It pops in, and if we gave you 2 minutes of that, you'd have maybe dozens of automatic thoughts that pop in. Okay, those are automatic thoughts. You don't have a lot of control over them. But if you are used to being anxious, you're more likely to have anxiety-provoking automatic thoughts. Okay, so and sometimes we call them automatic because they pop into your mind and they're just below the subconscious level. So one good thing to do is to be able to get in touch with your automatic thoughts, which means you just got to be still and become conscientious of what was I thinking. You know, your feelings will follow your beliefs. Your feelings will follow your beliefs or your thoughts. And so if you're feeling something, you can be assured that your thoughts preceded the emotion, preceded the feeling. Okay? So that's a good principle to remember. Thoughts precede feelings. So emotions are a good barometer for us to know what we're believing or what we're thinking. Example of an automatic thought. I'm driving to the airport. I've allotted the perfect amount of time to get to the airport, to get to my flight, and I hit 322 on the way down to 95, and it's backed up all the way to Route 1. Now, I can feel my anxiety. And there's this image that pops in my head of the gate closing as I'm running to it, right? And then I start thinking, gosh, the next flight's probably 8 hours. I'll be sitting in the airport for 8 hours, right? That's imagination. But that overtook me before I even conscientiously tried to think about that. It's just there, right? Those are automatic thoughts. So the quick answer to automatic thoughts and anxiety-producing thoughts is redirecting those thoughts to the present and to the truth and to God's presence. Does that make sense?
Could you repeat those three things, Dave?
Yeah,
Redirecting to?
Yeah, I'm going to redirect my automatic thoughts to the present, to the truth, and to God's presence. I'll unpack that a little bit, but I just want you to get that, okay? What does that mean? Well, one of the things it means is we're going to stop and become conscious of what the thought was, okay? In order to do that, you have to have some self-awareness. You have to have emotional awareness that you're feeling something instead of squelching it immediately. And you've got to be conscientious and be aware that, okay, I was just thinking about this, right? So, in every situation where we're having anxiety, most of the time we're telling ourselves false stories. We are false prophets. You got on a Zoom call for me to call you a false prophet. You are, right? We think things that are false, okay? And so one of the things I have to do is I have to get grounded in truth and reality, redirect my automatic thought to the present. So here, this is a real example. I remember when I was practicing law, I was getting ready for trials, and I woke up at 3 a.m, and I'm thinking about the depositions I have to take. I'm thinking about the briefs I have to write. I'm thinking about more things than any normal person could handle. And I'm stressing about them because I'm not thinking, oh, the deposition is going to go great, or this is going to happen. I'm thinking all bad thoughts about these things, right? And so what I'm doing at 3 a.m. is I'm laying there in a safe, cozy bed, freaking out because I'm importing my imagination of that future event. So what do? I slow myself down and I start to say the truth about the situation. The truth is, David, you're not taking that deposition. You're not on trial. You're not giving an opening argument right now. You're safe. You're in bed. You're warm. You're cozy. Right? I'm sitting in my chair and I'm safe. I'm here. Right? What that does is that brings you into the present. The better, even more truth is I'm not only safe where I am, I'm not only present in the present, I'm in God's presence. Okay, that's even better. So I'm not only here, I'm safe in my bed, and I'm present, but God's with me. He has me. He's holding me. He holds me by my right hand, right? And if you know scripture, now you're really grounded in truth, like he holds me by my right hand. God's with me. He beams into light over me. I can tell myself truth about who I am in God. So now do you see how that shift is going to start to affect my emotions? Because thoughts precede emotions. My emotions are going to calm because my thoughts are turning to much more peaceful, true thoughts. All right? I'm not talking about delusion here. I'm talking about what's the truth. And you see, God calls us to be truth tellers. This is a really important point. You should write that down. God calls us to be truth tellers. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, Jesus said, you shall know the truth shall set you free. And those who love Christ love truth. As a matter of fact, I would argue that one of the marks of conversion and being a Christian is that you love the truth. You stop lying to yourself and lying to other people. You start to love the truth. And so one of the big commandments is you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, right? That's one of the big 10. What if we say, isn't it true that we shouldn't bear false witness against ourselves? And how often do we do that? By imagining lies or engaging in fantasies, essentially. We lie to ourselves and we lie about ourselves. So the truth, then, I'm redirecting my thoughts to the truth. I'm staying in God's presence. I'm staying present where I am, speaking the truth about where I am. By the way, one other thing about the idea of these anxiety-producing thoughts, most of us, when we think about bad things happening, we don't think the reality. We actually catastrophize. We think worst-case scenarios, right? It's called catastrophizing. All right, that's a really important term to get familiar with if you tend toward this, because it's not that you think, oh, I'm going to be late. It's, I'm going to be late and I'm going to be embarrassed, or I'm going to be fired, or the worst, I'm going to get up and preach my sermon and I'm not going to remember what to say. And when I get up there, I'm going to say some word that I don't even want to say in public, right? You start to think about the worst case scenario. And that's called catastrophizing. So another helpful thing is to learn when you catastrophize. Holiday season's here, Christmas is coming, I'm going to be all alone. In fact, I'm going to be all alone and no one loves me. I'm going to be all alone and no one loves me, and I will never find anyone in my life. Do you see how these kind of thoughts beget further negative thoughts, and they go to the extreme? And I started to realize that about myself. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, I always have these negative thoughts. And negative thoughts beget negative thoughts, and it spirals. And here's my theory, and I think somebody who knows neurology would probably give a medical reason for this. My theory is that your brain acclimates to negativity and negative thoughts. It acclimates and it becomes habitual. So no matter what happens, it's bad. I'll give you an example. I was at dinner with somebody recently, and she said, I have to tell you that I got somebody left me an inheritance. Somebody left me a lot of money. I'm like, really? That's great. That's good news. Yeah. I'm just worried that it's going to, make my taxes high, and it's going to kick me off my insurance. And, I might even get kicked out of my subsidized housing. You see, acclimated to negativity goes right to it. And I know this person does this all the time. So it was just sort of a, okay, there it is. It's Eeyore, if you know Eeyore. All right. Let me pause here. And anybody have any questions or observations or thoughts? Steve, you getting ready to say something? I don't know if you're talking. Nobody? Yeah, I must be crystal clear. Okay. All right. Can you bear some more truth here? So so a great exercise is when you start to think, number one, one skill you have to develop is, I've got to start to notice my automatic thoughts. I got to start to become aware of them. One of the ways you start to become aware of automatic thoughts is become more aware of your emotion. And when you start to feel anxious or even depressed, see, depression works the same way. When you have depressive thoughts, it's going to impact you, and the impact is going to be the feeling of sadness or depression. And by the way, I'm not saying every time you're anxious or every time you're depressed, it's always caused this way, but I'm saying I think a lot of what we experience in normal everyday life is this kind of thing. So you have to become particularly sensitive to noting the automatic thought and isolating it and writing it down, it's identifying it, all right, and then being able to say, is it true? And be able to say, okay, my feelings are coming out of the thought, I'm not going to entertain that imagination. I'm going to stay present in God's presence, and I'm going to be grounded in truth. Okay. Now, let me give you some other examples of automatic thoughts and how they affect us. Okay. Because it's not just, oh, this thing is bad, that's going to happen. It's more like, I'm going to fail. I can't get things together. I'm stupid. No one will respect me. I'm no good. Why can't I ever succeed? No one understands me. I won't do it right. I hate myself. My life is a mess. I'll never make it. I feel helpless. My future's so bleak. You see, it's all these kind of thoughts that if you were really thinking clearly, you would say you're engaging in all or nothing thinking. And rather than saying, I failed this test because I didn't study well enough for it, I'm stupid and I'll never pass a course. See, it's all or nothing thinking. So what's your version? That'd be a question I'd ask you. What's your version? What kind of automatic thoughts do you, what kind of self-talk do you have? Sometimes I say, it's like Pharaoh sitting on your shoulder saying things to you about yourself. Okay? Write a couple of them down. What kind of thoughts do you have? One of the biggest thoughts that I have had to wrestle with is I have nothing to offer. Or I'm no good.
It's amazing how we can find the zingers, to that, like our brains, when we're programmed, we find just the right zinger to really make us feel bad. It's like.
Yeah. We're our own worst enemies in that way, in this regard. And it's what's interesting. Each of you I know are really beautiful, nice people, and you may have the most ugly thoughts to yourself. But if your children or some friend came up to you and said, "I stink. I'm no good at this," most of you would say, "Oh, what are you talking about? You're very good. You're doing this all or nothing thinking, rather than just being truthful, right?"
Yeah. Why are we inclined to do that? Like, why is it that, I understand what you were saying about, habit and, even the neurotransmitters in our brain get rewired and all that. But, it just seems like we're more inclined to go to the negative than we are to the positive.
Right. I'm not sure if I can give you a real comprehensive answer there. I do think it's stuff we've caught from our parents and other people around us. We learn how to think. Excuse me.
Yeah. Can I jump in here? I just came out of a situation where I was living with a very toxic son who was addicted. And he spent 6 months telling me everything that was wrong about me. And I was trying to help him, and I'm finding now that I've evicted him, that all of that's still playing in my mind. So it's like not only would maybe I would think that, but I have someone that actually said stuff like that to me.
Yes.
I really feel damaged.
Yeah. You see, here's the deal. I mean, that was 6 months, right? And that person, now think about, you grew up with a parent who says you're stupid. You're not beautiful. You're ugly. You can't do it right. What's wrong with you? You see, we start to those kind of messages inside.
Yes.
As opposed to, what does God say about us? See, that's one of the other things. Well, what does God say? I love you. You're beautiful. You're mine. I bought you. Yes, we have depravity, and yes, we have dignity. It's dual track, and we're redeemed, so he loves us. So for me, what's made a huge difference for me personally along these lines of redirecting automatic thoughts is getting in the habit of doing it. And let me just tell you, on a practical level, you have to be intentional about it. You have to be relentless about it. So one of the exercises I'll give somebody who I'm counseling will be something like, I want you to track your automatic thoughts. Mm-hmm. And when you track your automatic thought, I want you to tell me what the circumstance was before you had that automatic thought. Mm-hmm. And then I ask the question, is it true? Is that thought true? And what evidence do you have that it's true? Mm-hmm. You see? And so when you start to do that relentlessly and intentionally, and replace your automatic thought, the negative thought, with the truth. What's the truth? So I failed a test. I'm stupid. I'll never get it right. Okay, wait a minute. Hold on. Let's back up. What's the truth? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it that you're stupid and you'll never get it right, or that you did not study for this test, or that your brain is not wired for math as much as it's wired for history? And so you have to work harder for math than it is for history or law, right? There's nuances there. And when you start to change the way you start to think about things, which is what has made a huge difference in my life, that I start to not think I'm such a jerk, or I'm so bad, or I didn't do this right. I start to think, okay, wait a minute. I can't preach like Tim Keller. I'm not Tim Keller, but God's gifted me in my areas, and therefore I can do this thing, and it's okay that I'm not this, right? Or if I want to be like Tim Keller, I could study how to be like Tim Keller. And by the way, I just do want to say, I'm not talking about just the power of positive thinking here. I mean, there is some truth to positive thinking, but it's grounded in biblical truth. That's a distinction that I think I'd like to make, is that the truth we're grounded in is biblical truth under the lordship of Christ, not some fantasy, of humanity.
Sometimes, I find myself, imprisoning myself, I guess, with my past, things that I've done in my past. And then situations come up, and that pops up as a reinforcer. It's kind of like a reoccurring nightmare, but it has some reality in that it's my past, it's things I've done.
Yes. Okay. But here's the question. I'd want you to reinterpret your past in light of truth. What lies, let's just say in my past, I did this thing that's really bad. The question would be, what does that mean? And my interpretation of that past event would probably be inaccurate about me as a person, So you can reinterpret the past in light of truth today, not when you were 18, but now when you're 40 or 50. Okay. So that's just a really important distinction. But you're highlighting a really important thing, which is our past is going to impact our present unless we take a redemptive look at our past, not a condemning look, a redemptive look. All right. Now,
may I interject?
Yeah.
So I just spent 3 weeks taking care of my elderly parents, and it was very humbling because I lived in my home. I took care of them. My family, my husband and my daughter weren't with me the whole time, and they're very dependent now. But I had to confront a lot of my past, which I struggle with when I go home. And let me tell you, it was a battle from hell
Yeah.
to have to serve my very needy parents while battling all the garbage that is really not something I battle most of the time when I'm living in my different state, in my different home.
Right.
But being in that same environment, and yet now having a totally different role than I did before, I found myself still going back to those former thoughts and feelings towards my parents that I felt very convicted by, because I have some serious forgiveness issues I'm going to have to work through with them.
Sure.
But it's not even them anymore. It's just my own, it's my own baggage that I'm dragging.
That's right.
Here's just another opportunity that the Lord wants me to work through. And it was hard because they're totally, serious health issues. And I'm just going to my dad's, I guess, here's an example. I realized how much I got yelled at as a child, and my father has to yell now because he can't hear and he can't walk practically.
Right.
So as I'm walking to get him a glass of water for the 15th time that day, I'm thinking, Lord, give me grace to love him. He can't do it. And I'm just battling that. Whatever that feeling was and those thoughts that I had, that I just wanted to throttle him because, I have all this added baggage that was being triggered again from, from the past and all my own thoughts and insecurities and feelings that, come with that. And it was thank God for the Lord and scripture. And, one time I had to sit and listen to a whole sermon before I could respond to something because I was so upset about things. It was constant having to renew the mind.
Yeah. And you're highlighting. It
wasn't pretty. I'm not going to lie. It was not pretty. So,
I think for most of us, it's not pretty. I mean,
it wasn't pretty.
And when you're put in that circumstance, we do get triggered. And the good news is that we have the opportunity to go back to the past and to sort of not allow the adoption of what we believe and things like that from the past to impact us as great as it once did. But it takes awareness and intentionality in that. And it's hard work. So I commend you for controlling yourself and not committing any crimes when you were there. That was good. What's your first name, by the way?
My name is, I put Lily Baker. It says Michael Baker because that's our computer, but it's Lily Baker.
Nice to meet you.
And I'm here because Piper Lowell Fordham invited me to come in.
Great. Well, thank you. Okay. We have gone about an hour, and I probably have 9 hours more material, but do you want to stretch? Do you guys need a quick, why don't we take a 3-minute bathroom break? Or comfort break, if you will, or stretch break. And then we'll come back and I'll wrap this piece up and then we'll get into some of the skills, some really practical skills that I want you to learn. But we'll finish up the REST, the acronym REST. We've only done R, redirecting our automatic thoughts. So we're going to do the other three quickly and then we'll do the rest, okay? So let's just take a minute. I will make sure that you do not see the rest of this room. And I'll just take 3 minutes, okay? I love the doggy. Miss Baker, what did you say your first name was, and how did you know us? How did you get invited to this?
Through Piper.
Oh, through
Piper Lowell. Yeah. I live in Maryland. I attend Wallace Presbyterian Church. And I've known the Piper Fordham Lowell for, I don't know, 28 years.
Okay. Okay, great.
And so she and I have been talking, and she knows about my situation with my family, and she's been a blessing to me. And so she encouraged me to join the webinar, register and join.
That's awesome.
And my name is Lily. It's a nickname, but it's Lily.
Lily, great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Is everybody from Pennsylvania?
I think most people that are on the call today are, yeah. I'm in Westchester.
Okay.
And ServingLeaders Ministries, we're based in Westchester.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I understand what Lily's going through because I do a lot of taking care of my 91-year-old mother. So right now she's in the hospital and I can't visit her because of COVID and pneumonia. Yeah. So, but she's getting better and she'll probably be out in 14 days, but she depends on a lot for my care and everything, even though she's living independently. So I can understand what Lily's going through, and you know, I'll definitely keep her in my prayers.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, it has 3 minutes elapsed. I don't want to break my promise here, but I want to keep going. All right, so here's the bottom line on the automatic thoughts, redirecting our automatic thoughts. A thought is just a thought. It doesn't mean it's true. We don't have to believe things that are not true. And it takes conscientious intentionality to go after those thoughts and to start to turn them around. I am a testimony to that. As you start to do this more and more, you'll catch the automatic thoughts and you'll be able to dispute them much quicker. And it does take practice, so you have to be patient, okay? So the big picture here is, how do we deal with internal stressors, particularly anxiety? A, R, we're going to rest. R is redirect automatic thoughts. E, emotions. I'm going to ask myself, what am I feeling? I want to become aware of my feelings. Now that's countercultural to a lot of people, both in Christianity and outside of Christianity, because many times don't go by what you feel. Suppress your feelings, particularly if you feel pain. I would say no. You're designed to feel pain. If you have something that's painful, allow yourself to feel it. Can you stop and say, I'm feeling anxiety, or I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling rejected? And then take a moment and just identify it and name what it is. Name it. What do you feel like? Where do you feel it? Where in your body? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your chest? Is it your neck? Is it your shoulders? Where are you feeling it? And what's it like for you to feel it, okay? So just becoming emotionally aware and just identifying it, not trying to fight it. Most of us try to fight it. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to, and we medicate, we self-medicate. We're so used to turning to something to get us out of the feeling that we're used to not feeling, okay? So I'm going to redirect my automatic thoughts. I'm going to enter into my emotion. I'm going to feel what I'm feeling, really without judgment. Part of moving from anxiety to rest is acknowledging what we're feeling and bringing it to God. Bringing it right to God. God, I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling in pain. I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling bitter. I'm enraged, right? Think about David and how he prayed, how he was honest with himself. He was honest with God. He did not hide from God. God, I feel like you've forsaken me. Why did you forsake me? How could you do this to me? Right? Darkness is my friend, not you, God. Those are all, that's right out of the Psalms. God didn't strike him dead. Right? He said he's a man after God's heart. In part, he's honest, in touch with his feelings, and honest before the Lord. I'm not saying act on your feelings. I'm not saying I'm enraged, therefore go break windows. Not saying that. I am saying get in touch and feel it. Okay? Number three, self-care. In the moment that you're feeling, whatever you're feeling internally, engage in a little scan of how well are you engaging in self-care. In other words, are you sleeping well? Are you taking time to sleep and rest and exercise and entering a healthy rhythm of life? Okay? And when you assess that, that helps you gauge your capacity and gauge your resilience, right? So, you know, I was in the office today and I was with Joe and I was yawning like crazy. My resilience was a little down. And I happen to remember, you know, I went to bed last night at 11, but stupidly drank a huge cup of coffee at about 10, and I was up till 2. So I'm thinking, how am I feeling right now? I'm a little anxious. What's going on? Well, I'm really not I'm not operating on 8 or 10 hours of sleep. So sleep, exercise, diet, these are important ingredients. As a matter of fact, they're essential. Essential. At Serving Leaders, we have one of our staff, her name's Laura Nagy, and she is a wellness coach. She's a certified registered dietitian. She's getting her counseling degree. I invited her to do this piece of the talk. She couldn't make it. But if anybody wants some great coaching on diet, exercise, movement, I mean, it's so important. And if you came for counseling to any of our counselors for depression or anxiety, we'd always be checking in with sleep, diet, exercise. Are you practicing Sabbath? Right? These are important elements. These are not minor things. And in fact, if you want a great resource, read the book, Why We Sleep. Great book on the importance of sleep, the health benefits of sleep, and the incredible deadly effects if you don't sleep. Okay? Not to scare anybody, but it's really important. Why we sleep.
I find that sleep component so hard. I don't know if anybody else is struggling with this as a middle-aged woman with hormone changes and, anxiety with issues with, and even when I'm trying to go back to focusing on, the things that you're saying, just the hormones itself throws it off. And I mean, I'm also a light sleeper. I mean, the cold room, 65 degrees, the dark shades, the earplugs. I mean, it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
and and it's like 5 hours, maybe. I haven't slept, and the anxiety makes it worse. So
that's right. So there's no question that it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging. I will tell you that as you adjust gradually to a lot of the things that we're talking about, you'll find sleep will come easier. And of course, there's lots of aids. There's lots of things that you can consult with people about helping sleep. But it's a real factor. It's a real problem. I get that. But here's the bottom line. What's my capacity right now? Well, I haven't been resting. I've been eating junk food all day. I haven't exercised for 3 weeks. Okay. That tells you something about your capacity is lower. You're not going to be able to fill that up. You're not going to have the resilience that you want to have. All right. And then finally, T for talk to God. And that's obviously prayer. Bring everything to the Lord in all things through prayer and supplication. So there's not an area of life that ought to be untouched by your prayer life. There's nothing base or too dirty or too shameful to bring to God specifically and pray. By the way, I didn't plan on talking about this, but I will tell you a practice that I've started to engage in that's very, very helpful, but sometimes for helping me sleep, but also it's basically I do a scan of my body. Now, one exercise to help relax is to go through each part of your body, starting at your toes, your feet, your legs, your ankles, all the way up, and each of them, just focus on them and relax them. Okay, just be aware of them. Okay. Now, again, I'm speaking only on a headline and not because I'm an expert, but there's a term called Intraception. Have you ever heard of it? Interoception. basically, when you focus your mind on a part of your body, there are benefits to your brain and the way your brain wires, the way your brain connects, etc. You can look at that more. And someday I'll do a talk on it. But here's the bottom line. Here's what I did. I turned that exercise into a sort of an item of worship or prayer. And I'd say, God, I'm feeling my feet right now as I'm laying in bed. Lord, may my feet carry me to you. May my feet be righteous before you. I'm standing on my legs, Lord. My thighs, Father. May you give me strength to serve you. And I spontaneously pray something out of the part of my body. My stomach, Lord, may it glorify you in my eating. My brain, Lord, and again, I'm focusing on those parts of my body because that's really healthy to do. There's neurological benefits for just that. Interoception is called. But I'm turning it into a prayer. I'm saying every part of my body, Lord, my chest, may I put on the breastplate of righteousness. If you can't think of anything else, it's Ephesians. But may my arms be strong for you, Lord. Everything's directed to the body and to God. So it has helped me go to sleep a lot. It helped me just focus on him. Okay. So that's the rest part. That's the REST, going from the internal stressors to rest. Okay. Let me just briefly talk about the external stressors of life and in this Christmas season. Non-relational stressors in our lives. What are my non-people stressors or non-relational stressors, right? So, I have to go shopping, I have to clean, work deadlines, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the kind of external stressors that are going to impact us. And relational stressors. I mean, we could do a whole seminar on relational stressors, right? So if you take a moment to consider, what are the relational stressors that are affecting you? How do you handle relationships? Remember I said Uncle Gus is still Uncle, and despite my fantasy that, my kids are going to be here and it's going to be wonderful, and I'm blocking out the fact that sometimes my kids fight. Or my uncle's going to be here and I'm blocking out the fact that 9 times out of 10 times that my uncle has come down from New York, he has been 3 hours late. Right? Because I live in this fantasy world. So difficult people still are difficult. Toxic people are still difficult. So I put down some quick tips for you. How do you manage suggestions for managing relational stressors, difficult people, and toxic people? Okay, number 1, get real. Right? And by the way, Lily, I don't know if you see that. There's a handout in the chat room. Okay. Get real. So have realistic expectations. People who are difficult are still difficult, despite Christmas, right? And despite my magical thinking that they won't be. All right. Number 2, turn to wonder. When anytime you start to judge someone, turn to wonder, meaning, I wonder what happened to this person that they're like this. Or I wonder what my reaction about this person tells me about me. Okay? When you do that, that helps you develop compassion for another person. You become less judgmental, because all behavior makes sense if you understand context. And when somebody's grumpy, when somebody's a jerk, when somebody's acting like they are, there's a reason for it. If you turn to wonder, it can help you cultivate some compassion. I'm not saying you never have to smack somebody. You can sometimes, but that's a different story. Number 3, ask yourself and monitor, what's my capacity right now? Like, if you have a real difficult child, you might not have the capacity to deal with her stuff in this moment. Knowing that is really helpful, right? Okay, I'm not going to deal with this right now. Maybe this isn't the time. Number 4, I say think radiation. What the heck are you talking about? Well, when I practiced law, my specialty was radiation litigation. I defended nuclear power plants. And there was a principle of radiation protection that every health physicist and radiation protection technician knows. And it's called time, distance, and shielding. when you're around radiation, you want to reduce your time. You want to increase your distance from the radioactive source. And you want to shield. In other words, you want something between you and the radioactive source. That's why when you get an X-ray, that technician runs behind the wall and watches you through the window. That's called distance and shielding. And I've been in the bowels of nuclear plants where there's high sources of radiation. The key is stay time. You don't stay there very long. The less time you're there, the less dose you get. Okay? Now, let's translate. When you're around a toxic person, time, distance, shielding. How much time can I spend with this person? What's my capacity? Do I need shielding? Do I need to just put other people or things between me and her and him? And distance. You know, maybe I can't try to be so close. I'd love to go rescue my aunt so-and-so, my father, I'd love to rescue them from their junk and their toxicity, but I can't, right? I have to keep distance. I have to have appropriate boundaries, all right? So, again, it's a difficult season when you're around difficult people. So realize that and set your realistic expectations, okay? And finally, don't do it alone. Share your burdens, share your problems with friends, with safe people. Maybe you have a counselor, trusted people. Try to engage more, right? Those are all realistic. And again, understanding your capacity is being a wise steward of God's ministry that he's given you, right? Sometimes you just can't handle things, and it's okay. Okay? So let me pause there and see if there's any questions. And also, we're gonna go into 2 skills now, very practical skills that I'm gonna get you guys to practice and do. But anything on your minds thus far that I've talked about that you'd like to ask. And by the way, I'm gonna ask Angela. Angela, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I don't know if this is possible, but if it is possible, could you write up, could you put in our chat a evaluation of this webinar, like just 2 questions, 3 questions that you could ask people to fill out online if they click that while they're here, if that's possible. And if it's not, it's fine.
Sorry, you cut out part of the way through. So you want 3 questions?
Just make up 3 questions to ask these fine people who are here on evaluation to do online as we're here at the end.
Okay.
Now, see what I've done is I've just added to her stress, and she's evaluating capacity, and she's going to her automatic thoughts, which are going, can I do this? Can I say no to my boss? Can I say, wait a minute, which is all perfectly legitimate in my opinion. So you're allowed to say, Dave, I don't think that's real feasible right now. No, thank you. And that's fine. Okay, so anyway, yeah.
I did want to ask a question about distance.
Yes. Who's talking?
If this is Piper.
Can we see you, Piper? Is that at all feasible? Hi.
Hey.
There you go. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm in a public space and I was on a treadmill, so having the video off was really important. If the external stressors, if it's a situation like what Lily was in, or just with some home life, if it's where you are and the people that you're with, there's no capacity for distance unless you just lock yourself in the bathroom.
Right. Sometimes that's the reality of the situation, right? There are people over, when the lockdowns first began, right? We're locked in, basically we don't have the option of getting away from people, or circumstances are like that. And so sometimes you can't have the distance, but you can have if you can, try to erect appropriate boundaries in terms of what you talk about, what you allow someone to know. I don't know your specific situation, and I'm sure it's very contextual, but the reality is there's sometimes when we can't get the distance. That's absolutely true. And again, recognizing that the fact that you can't get distance and you have no control is going to increase your stress level. when you take away people's control and choice, that increases, it decreases our capacity, and it increases our anxiety, and sometimes well-founded.
So if I may, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So the past couple of years, there's been a very tense situation that happened at our church. And, you know, it was so tense that it was almost like the church split into the Hatfields and the Macaws, representing the, you know, the
Yeah.
two groups. And as these things happen in the church, so much so that the Peacemakers, the organization Peacemakers, was brought in to help us out. And,
Right.
you know, one of the things that I'm trying to reconcile, and I've had to reconcile in my own life, and I'm working on reconciling continuously, is that, you know, that we're supposed to love our enemies and serve them, and yet still maintain boundaries, and, you know, create a situation where we have healthy relationships, but all the while we're trying to love people who can be very toxic. And I've have a couple of those relationships in my life. And
So let me just ask you to ask the question, because I think I get the setup here. So what's the question?
so the question is, you know, how do you manage that balance? Because I find it incredibly difficult and hard to know, you know, the balance between loving my neighbor and serving them, or the people that I struggle with the most, and not, you know, separating myself 100% from it, but also at the same time maintaining the boundary. I find that incredibly difficult, and I find it unclear. And I've spoken to pastors and counselors, and we've had, I mean, this is a subject that I've been really focused in on, which is one of the reasons why I'm here. So maybe you have some clarity that I had just, I'm muddling through. It's not easy.
Well, I would look, first of all, let's recognize the fact that this is not a scientific process. It's very difficult to maintain the balance between having an appropriate boundary and being hardened, or having bitterness or anger, inappropriate anger, or being appropriately angry and then not acting out on it. And what does it look, the question is, what does it look like to love somebody redemptively? That's the question.
Exactly.
And when there is somebody who's toxic, let's just use the idea of toxicity, you're not going to redeem that person. There's evidence when somebody is, in a sense, redemptive, there's evidence of repentance and love of truth. So the pastoral issues that I have dealt with through serving leaders, when we're dealing with toxic pastors, they're not interested in truth. And that becomes very evident very quickly. And when you know somebody's not interested in truth and walking honestly in truth, then that's where the boundary increases, and you don't give. You do not sort of cast your pearls before swine and let it be trampled underfoot. You have to use a lot of wisdom. But it takes, I think, in my opinion, it takes a whole lot of experience of dealing with toxic people to know those balances. One thing I would tell you, I would encourage you to learn about, and by the way, comes out of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality and Emotionally Healthy Relationship courses by Pete and Jerry Scazzaro.
I've read his books.
Good. Well, okay, that's a good start. But the latter,
the church one, which I love the church ones for the shepherds in the church. I gave those to my session.
Look at the exercise called the Ladder of Integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Ladder of Integrity.
Okay.
And
I'll go back.
When people do that, and I use that as I do a lot of mediation in churches and things like that. And when you use a ladder of integrity in a right way, it can really help you get to the values that have been violated and to respectfully express those. So we've done it. I can't tell you how many times I've used that tool. I'm doing 2 right now, doing 1 tomorrow, actually, in a church situation. And I just did 1 Monday for 3 hours. So really helpful. All right, let me keep going. Now, all right, guys, this is your turn now. I'm going to teach you 2 skills that I think are incredibly helpful and transformative. That again, we teach in the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course. I will tell you that we are launching the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course at my church via Zoom on, January 10th. If you're interested in registering, go today, because it's filling up. I know a few of you are registered already for this course, but it's a very, very powerful course. And you can go to our website, Serving Leaders, look at events, and you'll see it. I think it's up there. We may not even have time to get it up there yet. It may not be up there actually, but Providence Church in Westchester has it on their website. All right. So 2 exercises. Let's do the first one, which is a little simpler, and it's called Stop Mind Reading. And by the way, this is excellent for creating emotionally healthy Christmas season. Okay. Now, question: have you ever assumed something about a person, or that you know what they're thinking, and then had it affect the way you look at that person or look at yourself? I walk by a friend at church. He looks at me, he doesn't say hello, and I tell myself he's angry at me. That's what I'm talking about. My wife leaves the door unlocked when I had asked her to lock the door, and I think, well, she's just being really disrespectful, right? That's called mind reading. And the idea, the skill of stop mind reading is based on 2 biblical truths. That what we want to do is we want to eliminate assumptions and misunderstandings that can damage relationships. That's the goal. And the 2 biblical truths are this. Number 1, God is omniscient and I am not. God knows what's in your mind and I don't. I can't read minds. God does. The second truth is the 9th commandment, which says you shall not bear false witness, right? So when I make an assumption about another person who has hurt me or disappointed me, sometimes we're believing a lie about that person in our own head. And we're actually bearing false witness against that person, not to another person, but to our own, in our own head. And it's likely that if I do that, I might even pass that information on to other people when I talk about them. So again, I walk by the pastor and the pastor doesn't say hello, and I think he's just cold and aloof and arrogant, or he doesn't like me, or he saw me but he avoided me, right? All of that is self-talk. All of that is mind reading. So I want you to think about an assumption that you have made about someone in the past, let's say, week or so. And what story did you tell yourself? For example, someone who didn't call you back, someone who didn't return your phone call, your email to them perhaps, or something similar. Think about that situation in your own mind, where you told yourself a story. And what story did you tell yourself? When I worked at a large law firm many years ago, they had this chance to be selected to be lent as an attorney to the city of Philadelphia, so that that people could try cases for the city of Philadelphia, get real good trial experience. So working in a large law firm, you don't get very much trial experience to become a senior attorney. So I volunteered to do that. About 10 other associates volunteered to do that. And the way I was told they were going to pick who got to go to that was they put our names in a hat and literally picked out the name. So I wasn't there when they did that. And I heard that the pet partner who had done this picked my name. I didn't like the partner, and I assumed this partner didn't like me. The story I told myself was, he didn't really pick my name out of a hat. He just selected me to send me away. Now that is mind reading. And it was totally false. And it was born out of my own fantasy, not truth. Okay, that's an example of mind reading. Someone didn't call me back. I figure they don't care, right? That's mind reading. Listen to this quote. When we leave reality for a mental creation of our own doing and make hidden assumptions, we create a counterfeit world. And when we do this, it can properly be said that we exclude God from our lives because God doesn't exist outside of reality and truth. In doing so, we wreck relationships by creating endless confusion and conflict. So, I think, would you agree that we all engage in some form of mind reading? We assume somebody did something for some reason. Stop mind reading is a skill that's designed to stop mind reading, so we stop misunderstandings and taking offense in our families, our churches, our workplace, and it helps us to love each other well. So here's how we do it. You ready? This is really, really easy in a sense. I'm just going to give you the steps, and then I'm going to do it with you. I'm going to do it with you, and then I'm going to ask you, if you're with somebody, to do it with someone else, and if not, maybe I'll just ask for some volunteers. Okay, we can do a sort of we can play act a little bit. So here's the 2 steps that are on your sheet too. Number 1, you ask permission. So it might say, Joe, Bruni, do I have permission to read your mind?
Sure.
Okay, that's it. That's the first step. Now, doesn't that sound weird? Do I have permission to read your mind? Yeah. But if you take the course, and if your whole church is taking the course, then everybody knows the language. And if you feel it's too, so like in my church, we've been teaching this for like 10 years now. Everybody knows who's come through the course. If I come in and say, do I have permission to read your mind? You don't look at me like I'm crazy. All right. So do I have permission to read your mind? Yes. Or if you don't like that language, you could say, hey, Joe, could I check out an assumption with you?
Of course.
Okay, so that's step number 1. And the second step is, if you look at the formula there, I think that you think blank, or I assume that you think. Is that correct? So, Joe, do I have permission to read your mind?
Yep.
Okay. When I left today at 4 p.m., did you think I was being really lazy?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, so now if he says, of course, and of course he's joking at this moment, I might say, so can you help me understand why? All right, we can talk about it. But this is something I was thinking he thought. So what I'm trying to do is clarify the truth. So actually, let's do the truth. Now, if that's the truth, Joe, we can talk. But when I left today at 4 o'clock, did you think I was being lazy?
No, not at all. I knew you had a lot going on and you were preparing for tonight.
Okay.
I didn't have that assumption at all.
Okay. Thank you. Right? Boom. Clarified. I didn't have to mind read. I was starting to mind read and I wanted to ask and check out my assumption. We tell ourselves lots of stories. Steve Burlew, do I have permission to read your mind?
Once I get myself unmuted.
Okay.
Sure.
I think that you think that this entire seminar tonight has been a waste of time. Is that true?
Not at all.
And you know, obviously in real life we could have a conversation. And he might even say, Dave, did I do something that caused you to think that, you know, that, right?
Right.
But you see, as a teacher, there's all kinds of thoughts that come into my mind. My own insecurities bubble up. And I'm thinking, am I being clear? Am I losing people? You know, all kinds of stuff, right? So in a classroom, sometimes it's good to check with everybody. But on an individual basis, what?
It's based on truth that the person is going to respond truthfully.
Yes.
Like, for example, if Joe had really thought that maybe you were being lazy, but because you're his boss, he would say, oh, no, of course not. But it is based on truth between two people.
It has to be, yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, and that's a given, right? So, you know, I say to my wife, Miho, Pete and Jerry use this example. The authors of the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, they use the example, and this is true in my marriage actually. I say, Mijo, when I take a nap on Sunday afternoon, I think that you think I'm lazy. Is that true? I'm like, no, I want you to take a nap. I want you to rest, right? We tell ourselves stories. All right. So who would like to go? Who would like to, you can do it with me. Who would like to read my mind? And you can make it up. You can just make up something if you want. But let's just demonstrate it. Yes, Christina.
Okay, Dave. Do I have permission to read your mind?
You do.
Okay. I think that when you came over to my house to do that little seminar for serving leaders a month ago, I think that you thought my house was lame because you have all these rich friends who have huge houses.
And is that true? You want to ask me, is that true?
Yeah, is that true?
No, Christina, not at all. That thought never even occurred to me at all. Okay. That's perfect. The way she did that was perfect, right? I'm staring at faces. I've been talking all night, babe. I've been talking all night, so it's your turn. Let's get some other people to try it.
Hey, Dave, can I read your mind?
Yes, you could try. You want permission to read my mind?
Do you think that I am trying to shoehorn too much because I'm trying to take a walk and listen to this webinar at the same time? Is that disrespectful to your time?
Okay, good. That's good. So I think that you think you're being disrespectful. That's what you would say to me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. No, not at all. I'm happy for you to be trying to take a walk while you're listening, because that's great. Good. That's a great example, Piper. Thank you.
Go ahead, do it again.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, James.
Do I have permission to read your mind?
Yes, you do.
I think that you think that, when I'm in these seminars with you, that I bring up the same thing over and over again.
No, not at all. I don't think that at all. As a matter of fact, I always appreciate that you participate and sort of spur the conversation.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Guys, do you see how easy that is? Now, for those of you who asked questions, what did it feel like to be in a sense disabused of the notion that you're carrying, right?
Can I ask a question just related to when you don't have the person to read their mind, that they're either not open to it or, they're not going to be, they're not going to be truthful.
Or you don't even have an opportunity to do it. Yeah, that's a great question. So
because I'm still mind reading.
Okay, perfect question, because that happens a lot. I think the key is to say, I'm mind reading right now. I am making an assumption about this person. Hey, I'll give you a real example. My neighbors just installed lights that shine into our windows, and it's ticking me off big time. I hate light pollution. And so I'm assuming they did it purposely. So, and the situation right now is I can't go ask them. All right. So what I do is I say, Dave, you're mind reading. They may not even know that how it shines into your thing. They might not have any clue at all. Okay. So you have to tell yourself the truth. And the truth is, I really don't know.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why do you think people do this or don't do it rather? Because I think it comes from a position, you're humbling yourself and making yourself vulnerable when you ask those questions like that.
It's a great question.
But do we benefit from not asking the question?
First of all, I think that it's not a cultural thing that we automatically check out our assumptions. I think it's pretty much human nature that we, again, just like the negative thoughts we've talked about and the automatic thoughts, we tend to catastrophize. We tend to think along these lines and make negative assumptions. I think we tend to be judgmental, you know, unless God gets a hold of us in these ways, you know, we tend to judgment for multiple reasons. And it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable to do it because it does make you vulnerable. You know, Christina asked a very vulnerable question, right? So did James, right? So did Piper. Sometimes the questions are more vulnerable than others. And sometimes people like to walk around and gossip in their own heads and tell other people stuff, right? So we got to love the truth. We got to love each other enough to actually do these things. And by the way, that one of the beautiful things about the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course is that the assumption is we want to love people, but we don't know how to love people. This is a skill that if you teach your kids and your friends and your family, and even people who don't even know the skill, you don't have to say, do I have permission to read your mind? They'll look at you like you're crazy. So you say, hey, can I just check out an assumption with you? Because I've been thinking that you've assumed or you think that I'm whatever. I'm arrogant or I'm stupid or you don't think I think that you don't think I'm very smart. Is that true?
Dave, can you talk about like how to be ready to hear the truth? You know, like let's just suppose that Joe was, you know, serious and he was like, yeah, I really think, you know, you were yada, yada, yada when you left today.
Well, another great question there. How do we get ready to hear truth about ourselves?
Right.
I think particularly leaders are truth starved because leaders tend to surround themselves with people who say, oh, yes, right? And sometimes people are in positions of power, like fathers and moms are in positions of power, and they've implicitly or explicitly taught kids not to be truthful.
Right.
So, you know, we have to create a culture where it's safe to be truthful. I've always found myself to be open to be the truth when I'm with people I think are for me and want my benefit or want my good. And that's a big thing. You know, do I believe someone wants me to be better? Are they going to speak into my life in a helpful, redemptive way?
And I think there's situations too, or you know, where there's people you can't access. You know what I mean? Because the relationship's been cut off, and so you have all these assumptions about.
Right.
You know what I mean? But you can't really access them.
Well, you know, and that's another great point because that's true. And so what you can do, what do you have control over? You have control over the thoughts. You have control over it, at least to say, look, I think this might be going on and this might be going on, but I really don't know until I check it out.
But I can't check it out. I have no access.
Because I can't check it out, I'm going to wonder. I'm going to wonder. I have two friends in my life. I mean, two really close friends who cut off relationship with me and didn't say they're cutting off relationship with me. It's just that I haven't heard from them in 25 years now. And for me and my wife, and it's a mystery. And there's no way to know. And so it's something I grieve. I'm sad about, I think about, and when I think about it, I go, man, I'm so sad. But there really is nothing I can do. So what can I do? I can turn it over to God. I can say, God, I grieve this. I rack my brain to wonder, did I offend? What happened? But I really don't know. And in God's providence, He's let it be something that I won't know. And maybe never know until, you know, heaven. So we have to sometimes live with that kind of mystery. Anybody else want to do a mind? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's also very hard because I find that in my own mind, the script that I write, as I write it, I am the reasonable superhero and the other person is the caricature.
Yeah. There you go. That's honest. Yeah.
And well, and I know this about myself, and so I'll try to do some caricature busting, and then I find out that their thought process is even worse than I thought.
Yeah.
In terms of unreal, just their view of perception and mine. Yeah.
Piper,
Like,
I'm sorry, that is really a phenomenal point. And let me just rephrase it in a way that's even a little more crass. I'll put it in my context. I'm actually way more arrogant than I thought I was.
well, I actually think that I am gobsmackingly arrogant. But then what do we do when we find out the person we're talking to has a pretty warped perception on reality?
Well,
Like, then all of a sudden there are two of you who have fallen down the rabbit hole, and then it's really hard.
yeah, and you know, look, the wonderful thing about God's grace and redemption is that there's no point of no return. We can return. We can say, hey, God, I'm arrogant. Look how arrogant I am, God. I see it. Thank you. Put your finger on it more. You know, when I first experienced that as a young Christian, I read the Bible, and I started to know where passages of scripture were in the Bible. And like, that was impressive to me, right? As a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid. And the more I learned the Bible, the more arrogant I got about it. And so I remember, like, I'd be on a date with a girl and I'd say, hey, open up the Bible and read a passage of scripture and I'll tell you where it is. All right. So I would do that. Now, here's what I noticed. I'm sitting in the sermon. The guy gets up and says, oh, everybody open up to 1 John chapter 3. And before he starts to read it, I say to myself, I know that passage. and I'm going like, so that's arrogance. And conviction is, oh, I was so puffed up knowing that I knew that passage that I didn't even listen to the man up there who has expertise in it and learned nothing. You arrogant fool. And conviction, in a sense, was refreshing. It wasn't humiliating. It was like, oh, look at that. How arrogant. And so I noticed that attitude permeated me for a while, habitually, until I intentionally went after it and started to go, there it is. There's my arrogance. Now, why don't you just shut up and listen for a minute? All right. And I've had that experience multiple times, you know, in church, similar experiences where, okay, there's my arrogance. Lord, help me repent. And you know what I start to look at, honestly, if you really want to go deeper? Why am I arrogant? I'm arrogant in areas where I'm really deeply insecure, but I don't know I'm insecure. I'm deeply insecure. There are areas in my life where I feel so flawed that I have to present the opposite or try to portray even to my own self the opposite. In other words, I got to engage in image management, even for my self-image. And I engage in lies and falsehood. And then the beauty of that is when God cuts through that in a loving way, not a condemning way, I'm like, thank you, God, get me free of this crap. And then I don't have to worry about it. And then over time, that becomes more, what becomes habitual is seeing it, not being condemned, walking in his grace and love, and like, okay, he loves me. I'm going to move through this. I'm turning away from that. So, look, there's one other skill. We're not going to do it, but it's worth me doing it if you let me just keep you over a couple of minutes. It's just having being able to clarify expectations. And so we won't do the skill, but let me just help you with this, because a lot of times, this is very similar to the mind reading thing. A lot of times what happened to my notes? I think I lost them. Here, they're there. A lot of times we make assumptions, we have expectations that are not really realistic. How many of you have been disappointed when something didn't come about? Because you had an expectation that something would happen and it didn't happen. And you get angry or you get resentful or whatever. So just look at this. 4 problems with our expectations on page 3. We have problems with expectations when we're unconscious that we have those. We don't know we had the expectation. that the expectation's unrealistic. Yeah, Uncle Fred is not going to tell a dirty joke, even though the last 20 years he's told a dirty joke. My kids will always be on time, even though they're never on time. It's unrealistic, okay? They're unspoken. Everybody should just know it. You don't have to say it. Everybody knows not to leave dishes in the sink. Why do I have to say it? And unagreed upon. So if you start to think about the expectations you have, and holiday season is like, if it's nothing, it's expectation, right? It's, oh my gosh, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, the kids are going to be this, the friends are going to be that, all this stuff, right? So an expectation is only valid if 4 things are met. Number 1, you're conscious of it. You know that you have the expectation. Number 2, it's a realistic expectation. Number 3, you've expressed it. It's not in your head. You've expressed it. And it's agreed upon. Okay? Those factors right there can redeem your life from misery. We've had people come to live with us in our house. We've taken in strangers. We've taken in people over the years. And one of the things my wife is great at is to talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about. One of the things she says is, listen, if you leave a dish in the sink, I will be really angry because I will feel like you are using me and taking advantage of me. So here's the expectation. If you use dishes, you will wash the dishes and you will put them away. That's expressed, it's conscious, it's realistic, and would you agree to that? Okay? And so when you were explicit about it, we talk about it, and how it goes is, hey, can we clarify expectations? Can I clarify our expectations here? You know, somebody asked me, you're coming to speak, how much do you, you're coming to speak, how much do you charge? Or somebody invited me to speak, I say, can I clarify expectation? How much time are you giving me? Do I have 3 minutes? Do I have a half hour? Right? So that's that. Right. So I'm going to wrap up, and then a couple of things. Number 1, I want to tell you, I really appreciate you hanging in with me. It's hard to sit for 2 hours. I really, really do appreciate your time. Number 2, Serving Leaders Ministries is a ministry that is designed to serve both ministry leaders and non-ministry leaders. Through counseling, we do mediations, we do lots of serving, teaching, things like that. We do for pastors, we do for non-pastors. We have SL counseling for non-pastors. We have Serving Leaders counseling for pastors. We've been in existence for almost 14 years now. February will be 14 years, which is hard to believe. It's a nonprofit ministry. I'm not gonna make an excuse. I'm just gonna say it's the end of year giving time. If you feel so moved to support our ministry financially, that would be phenomenal. And if you feel so moved to support us through your prayers, that would be phenomenal. And also just letting other people know what we do, that would be great. So really appreciate that. We love to serve. That's why we're here. We do have good boundaries. We do have 16, 17 members, people on staff to counsel. So you're invited to learn more about that. Could you take 3 minutes and just as we're sitting here, go to the chat room, you see the forms that Angela, thank you. You did that on the fly. I apologize for increasing your stress level. So if you could just take 3 minutes to do that online, and then I'll just stay here. We can dialogue, talk, answer questions. If you have to go, I totally get that. It's really good to see some of my old friends here and new friends. Really appreciate you being here.
Dave, I just want to say thanks for providing this, especially during such a busy time of the year. It was really helpful, and just a lot of it was good reminder, and just I really appreciate the 2 steps for mind reading. That'll come in handy, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. Yeah. So we'll just have this sort of time of silence, but I'll just hang out. If anybody wants to dialogue or has questions, if you need to go, I totally get that. If you do want to give online, you can go to servingleaders.org or send a check. We do, by the way, just one thing. We just got a number of our ministry friends put money into a pot to double people's donations right now between now and the end of the year. So if you give, your money gets doubled because they're going to match what's given. So that's a great opportunity. So questions, thoughts? Or I'll just shut up and let you fill out the online survey.
Dave, I have a thought I'd like to share, just because it's made such a big difference in my family ahead of holidays.
Yeah, what's your first name? Tell us your first name.
Kristen. Sorry, I don't have my Kristen.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has been.
Didn't we meet at Clean Sheets?
Yep. That was
My
the first
wife's show?
time.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Anyway, just I never realized how many expectations I had and others had without acknowledging them, even to myself. I just knew that after a holiday, I was disappointed, but I didn't know going into it that I had a lot of these hopes.
Yeah.
And so one thing I've just started to make like a regular practice is to ask people ahead of time, whoever I'm planning on getting together with. It's a lot fewer people this year, but what is one thing or two or three things without which this holiday would not be a success for you?
That's great.
So, and then, you know, that sort of sets them thinking, yeah, what are my hopes? What are my expectations? And then whether they give one thing or two or three things, I try to make sure that we work so that everybody has at least one of their expectations met.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So for some of us, it's going to be a walk in the woods. For some of it's going to be video games. For some of it's going to be a certain type of food. But just acknowledging upfront that we all have hopes and expectations and that disappointment will happen. Nobody can have all of them met. But addressing them has just been super helpful for me to have peace.
I appreciate that. That's a wonderful suggestion. It goes to Wayne's one of the questions that said, can you address post-holiday letdown?
Yeah.
Dealing with disappointment retrospectively, not having things to look forward to. I mean, that's really good. And you know what, Kristen, I like that idea, even if it's not in the holiday season.
Sure.
Hey, what are two things that you'd like to accomplish when we get together?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, just being really intentional.
Yeah. Or who's paying the bill if you order the expensive bottle of wine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. Yeah, great. Thank you. Good to see you.
I think for me, hi, I'm Ruth.
Hi, Ruth. Ruth, how do we know you?
I have been to a couple of your classes at Calvary.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know Angela.
Oh, great. Okay.
But I'm on your email list. So, yeah, I guess with the whole expectations thing, when they have been clarified. So I have a family member who only wants happy, nothing sad, which is not healthy.
Realistic. Yeah, not realistic. Yeah.
And it's not good for relationships because they shut down when anything negative is shared or stated.
Right.
So obviously, like, to have a real relationship, which they want, you can't have. So they've stated their expectations and only wanting happy. How do you, who've not agreed upon those, how do you have boundaries? Because when they only want happy, it's hurtful when you can't be real with them.
Yeah, so is it possible to have a conversation about that?
Sometimes they shut down even with that.
Is it possible to talk about that?
Hopefully.
Yeah, you know, and I get it, but I mean, right, the elephant in the room is, you know, can I, you know, like, Ruth, can I just reflect something to you when we're together? Sometimes it feels like you shut down if I broach a subject or if we talk about something, right?
Yeah.
And obviously you can't control whether they shut down. Or can we just talk about something? Here's what it feels like. You have an expectation that when we're together, it's always going to be happy. And I hate disappointing you, but at the same time, it's really hard. Can we talk about that? You know, maybe broach the subject in a way that, if you can, you know.
Yeah, and I've tried, and I can tell when they start to shut down. So it's like, okay, you have to back off.
Yeah. And so that's, I mean, and that's the reality of it. And so, you know, for you, then you have your own internal expectation, a realistic expectation, like this is likely how it can go. And what's a loving response in this? Is it to back off? Is it to just let it go? Is it to pursue a little bit more? You know, it's wisdom and judgment in the moment.
Yeah. And I think it's a part of a grief process, because I don't think that the person's going to be able to.
Yeah, that's the honest, that's the truth, right? And it's sad. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Doesn't have to be a question. It could be an observation or comment. If you were all, I'm sorry, I was going to say, if we were all together, I'd say, why don't we go, let's go out and get some dinner. Yeah, Steve's for it. Yeah.
So just one thing I was thinking when you were talking about the arrogance that we feel when we're judging other people because we have, you know, we're mind reading, or we're not clear on, you know, not on the same page as far as expectations.
Yeah.
I've been listening to some sermons about the prodigal son, and I realized how quickly I can become the older brother, you know. And it's just, I'm not gonna lie, even with this mask situation, I'm here, you know, I have become like, my judgy wand is out. Safe person, unsafe person, bad person, how dare you do this, you know, because I'm in a situation where I'm protecting my parents.
Right. That's right.
And I feel very threatened, and I feel, and I really have caught myself thinking, wow, you know, that's it's pretty harsh. You know, I'm pretty judgmental towards the people that I feel are not making what I consider to be the wisest choices. Sorry if I'm opening a can of worms here, guys, but I don't mean it to be a can of worms, except to say that I realize how arrogant I become. And I feel like I have the better way, or I believe something so adamantly that I'm murdering people in my heart for it. I've got a gravesite dug up next to my yard, I'm sure, in my heart, you know.
Yeah, Lily, can I ask you a question? What would it be like for you to turn to wonder about yourself? Not judgment, but wonder. I wonder what this reaction, my judgment, my harshness, I wonder what that tells me about me. And not just arrogance, because, you know, I mean, we all have arrogance, but like, can you go a little bit softer on yourself? Can you go a little bit to say, so what am I longing for? Or what am I afraid of?
Oh, my parents dying alone in a hospital.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not being able to protect them, but I can. I'm not the savior.
Okay, and so that tells
with that too, right? You know.
What does that tell you about your own heart?
That says a lot of things about that, right? Like, I mean, which direction do I go?
Well, I mean, to me, it strikes me as, it tells me that you're soft, that you love your parents, that you care, right? That you're longing for them to be okay.
Absolutely.
And you're protective. So those are really, really good qualities.
Thank you. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you can't protect them completely, right? We're not in control.
Right. And when you can't protect, you know, what does that feel like?
Helpless and vulnerable.
Right. And when we're helpless and vulnerable, what do?
Throw ourselves on the mercy of the Lord, because that's all we've got.
Yes. Or
we ain't got nothing else.
Or what we do.
Judge everything and become harsher.
That's right. We put up our protection.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Sucks though.
No. Painful.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So much of, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So much of what you said tonight, in each of these, in the rest part and in the expectations part, have brought out a lot to me about the toxic relationship I was dealing with my son.
Yeah.
And I realize from listening to that how I just didn't know how to handle it. And I'm really looking forward to taking this class because I really think that there's a lot that I could learn in relationships and in trying to be more open or more aware of where other people are coming from.
Yeah, that's right.
So I really thank you for this effort that you've made tonight, and it really opened a door for me, and I'm looking forward to January.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to having you. It's a great class. Every time I teach that class, I learn so much.
It's people, the heart of faith is trying to be present to people. And I find great comfort now in knowing that God is present to me. And so putting that together to reflect him, I need to be more open. So, I just, sometimes it's better to be a good listener than to say something. So tonight I was just trying to be a good listener.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's very powerful to be present and listen.
Yeah. So thank you, Dave.
You're very welcome. Good to see you, Jane.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been great to be with you. I appreciate you a lot. And this has been a rewarding time for me. And I just appreciate your engagement. So can I pray? And
Yes.
We'll
Please do.
Yeah. Father God, thank you for your faithfulness to us and for you showing up in this webinar here and just ministering to people, ministering to my heart. Lord, you knew my insecurities and my own anxieties. And so I thank you for just always coming through. Pray for your blessings on each of the people here. I pray that you give them a blessed, great Christmas season. And even despite some of the anxieties and fears that we have, I pray that you draw close to us. That is what Christmas is about, is you with us. And so I pray that we'd experience your presence and your grace and your love and comfort, and help us to be able to comfort others with that comfort with which you comfort us. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Pray for your blessings on them. Amen. All right.